The year was 1607, and the fate of a nation hung in the balance. A fleet of 3 ships carrying over 100 men sailed across the vast and treacherous Atlantic Ocean, their destination unknown except by a handful of hopeful planners back in England. The Virginia Company, eager to expand England's influence and claim a share of the riches pouring from the Americas, had invested heavily in this expedition. These men were not adventurers seeking leisure. They were pioneers tasked with establishing England's first permanent colony on a distant and mysterious continent. The settlement they would build would change history, but the path to survival was riddled with danger and uncertainty. As the ships approached the shores of the Chesapeake Bay, the land ahead was dense with thick forests and swampy marshes. The environment was unlike anything the settlers had seen before. The unfamiliar sounds of wildlife echoed through the trees, and a humid breeze carried the scent of salt water mixed with earth and unknown plants. The men anchored their vessels near a small peninsula and prepared to disembark. This was Jamestown, a name that would soon be etched into the story of the New World. From the very beginning, Jamestown was a place of hardship and challenge. The colony's leaders quickly realized that the terrain was difficult to navigate. The land was marshy and mosquito-infested, making disease a constant threat. The nearby waters were brackish and often polluted, limiting access to fresh water. Despite these obstacles, the settlers constructed a fort with wooden palisades to defend against possible attacks. They divided responsibilities among themselves, sending men to hunt, fish, and gather resources. But survival was not the only struggle. The settlers themselves were divided in vision and temperament. Many arrived hoping to find gold and riches quickly, while others sought to build a lasting community. Leadership disputes were frequent and morale was fragile. The colony's initial president, Edward Maria Wingfield, was eventually removed from power as the settlers' frustrations grew. Captain John Smith emerged as a strong leader during these critical early days. A seasoned soldier and explorer, Smith brought discipline and pragmatism to Jamestown. He enforced a strict work ethic, famously declaring that "he who shall not work shall not eat." His leadership was instrumental in organizing food gathering and fortifying defenses. Smith also recognized the importance of diplomacy with the powerful Powhatan Confederacy of Native American tribes that dominated the region. The relationship between the English settlers and the indigenous peoples was complex and fraught with tension. Early encounters were often marked by mistrust and sporadic violence. The Powhatan Confederacy, led by Chief Powhatan, controlled vast territory and saw the newcomers as potential threats. However, Smith's negotiations and mutual exchanges, including trading tools and food, helped maintain a fragile peace. Perhaps the most famous story from this period was Smith's capture and subsequent rescue by Pocahontas, Chief Powhatan's daughter, an event whose exact details remain debated but which symbolized the tentative alliance between the two peoples. Despite such efforts, the colony faced grave dangers beyond conflict. The first years were plagued by starvation, disease, and harsh winters. The settlers were ill-prepared for the rigors of their new environment. Many lacked the skills necessary for farming or building in such challenging conditions. Food shortages became so severe that during the winter of 1609-1610, known as the Starving Time, the population plummeted from around 500 to fewer than 60 survivors. Reports from this period tell of desperation so intense that some colonists resorted to cannibalism to survive. The arrival of new supply ships in the spring of 1610 brought relief, but also new challenges. Many of the newcomers were unaccustomed to the harsh realities of colonial life, and the cycle of hope followed by hardship continued. Among the fresh arrivals was Thomas West, Lord de la Warr, appointed as the new governor. His arrival marked a turning point as he imposed martial law and launched military campaigns against hostile tribes seeking to secure the colony's safety and stability. One of the most transformative developments for Jamestown was the introduction of tobacco cultivation. John Rolfe, an English settler and farmer, experimented with a strain of tobacco native to the Caribbean and developed a sweeter variety that quickly became popular in Europe. Tobacco soon emerged as a profitable cash crop and the economic foundation of the colony. Rolfe's success helped ensure Jamestown's financial viability and attracted more settlers eager to partake in the lucrative trade. Another significant milestone was the arrival of women and children. Until then, Jamestown had been primarily a male settlement focused on survival and exploration. The presence of families helped transform Jamestown into a true community with hopes for permanence. These social changes were accompanied by the establishment of formal government structures. In 1619, the House of Burgesses was formed, creating the first representative legislative assembly in English America. This institution laid early groundwork for democratic governance and self-rule that would later flourish throughout the colonies. However, peace with Native Americans remained fragile. The expanding tobacco plantations encroached on indigenous lands, leading to increased tensions. The Powhatan Uprising of 1622 was a devastating attack that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of settlers and nearly ended English colonial ambitions. Retaliation by the colonists led to further violence and a long-lasting cycle of conflict. These struggles revealed the complicated legacy of Jamestown, one of cooperation and cultural exchange, but also of dispossession and war. Jamestown's story is not simply one of conquest and survival. It is a narrative of resilience, adaptation, and transformation. The colonists learned to navigate the harsh realities of the New World, adapting their European customs to new environments and challenges. The settlement's success encouraged further colonization efforts along the Atlantic coast and helped establish England's claim to North America. By the end of its first decade, Jamestown had become a symbol of possibility and peril. The colony had endured the worst trials of famine, disease, and conflict. It had introduced the world to the power of tobacco and to new forms of governance. And it had forged a complicated relationship with the indigenous peoples whose land it occupied. The Jamestown Settlement was England's foothold in America, but it was also the beginning of a story that would shape centuries of history. It was a place where survival meant more than enduring the wilderness. It meant creating something new amidst uncertainty. The lessons learned in Jamestown echoed through the generations that followed, laying the foundation for a nation yet to be born. The Jamestown colony, having endured its earliest trials, stood at a crossroads. It was no longer merely a fragile outpost clinging to survival. It had become the foundation for England's expanding empire in the Americas. Yet the challenges ahead would test the settlers in new ways. The wilderness remained wild and untamed, and relationships with the indigenous peoples, though once hopeful, became increasingly strained and complex. One of the colony's greatest successes was the establishment of a profitable tobacco industry. John Rolfe's innovation in cultivating a milder tobacco variety transformed Jamestown's economic prospects. Tobacco exports soon became the colony's primary source of income, drawing more settlers who hoped to make their fortunes. Large plantations sprouted, demanding significant labor, which led to the introduction of indentured servants from Europe. These workers agreed to years of labor in exchange for passage across the ocean. But the demand for labor would later expand, tragically, to enslaved Africans, changing the social and economic fabric of the colony forever. As the colony's economy grew, so too did its political institutions. The establishment of the House of Burgesses in 1619 was a landmark event, representing the first elected legislative assembly in the Americas. This body gave settlers a voice in local governance, creating early democratic traditions that would echo through American history. While limited in scope and heavily influenced by wealthy landowners, the House of Burgesses laid essential groundwork for self-rule and political participation. Despite these advances, Jamestown's relationship with the Native American tribes became increasingly fraught. The initial period of cautious cooperation was replaced by conflict as the English expanded their settlements, claiming more land for tobacco cultivation. The Powhatan Uprising of 1622 was a devastating attack that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of colonists and sent shockwaves through the colony. The retaliatory campaigns by the settlers entrenched a bitter cycle of violence and deepened mistrust. The effects of these conflicts extended beyond immediate loss of life. They altered the trajectory of Jamestown and future colonies by defining relations with indigenous peoples as largely adversarial. The struggle for land and resources shaped policies and attitudes for decades, often with tragic consequences for Native American communities. Meanwhile, governance of the colony underwent changes as well, as the Virginia Company's charter was revoked in 1624 by King James I, and Virginia became a royal colony under direct crown control. This shift brought more stable leadership, but also tighter control from England, reflecting the growing importance of the colony to the empire's ambitions. The arrival of women and children in increasing numbers helped Jamestown evolve from a temporary trading post into a permanent community. Schools, churches, and families became part of the colonial landscape. The settlers began to establish roots, building infrastructure and social systems that would support future growth. Yet life remained hard. Disease, particularly malaria and dysentery, continued to take its toll. The harsh realities of colonial existence tested the settlers' resilience daily. The social structure of Jamestown was also taking shape, with wealthy plantation owners dominating politics and society, while indentured servants and later enslaved Africans faced harsh conditions and limited rights. Jamestown's history is a tapestry woven with ambition, courage, hardship, and complexity. It symbolizes the dawn of English America, a place where new ideas about government, economy, and society began to form. It also reflects the darker aspects of colonization, including displacement of indigenous peoples and the roots of racial inequality. By the mid-17th century, Jamestown had firmly established itself as a central hub of the English colonies. Its successes and failures informed the development of other settlements and set patterns that would persist throughout American colonial history. The legacy of Jamestown lives on not only in the historic site preserved today, but also in the democratic principles, economic systems, and cultural conflicts that shaped a new nation. In understanding Jamestown, one understands the complex beginnings of America, where the hopes of a few became the foundations for many, where survival and struggle were intertwined, and where the quest for opportunity came at great cost. The story of Jamestown is the story of a people forging a future amid the unknown, laying the groundwork for a country that would rise from the echoes of this first English foothold.